Hey guys, my name is Joanna, also known as Just Another Flutist here on YouTube, and today we are talking about my personal flute upgrade checklist. I'm making this video because a lot of you guys ask when you know to upgrade your flute, what parts of your flute to upgrade, etc, etc. I feel that the best way to tell you guys how to do that is to show you guys my own personal thinking behind my own upgrade checklist. So let's get started. We're gonna start from the beginning of my whole flute journey, and it begins with my Yamaha student model flute. This is an older model that is no longer available. This is the YFL 225 SII, I believe it is. 225 SII, exactly. This is what this baby looks like. Still fairly clean, right, for a flute that's 20 years old. My dad actually bought this flute for me right off the bat when I started playing, and it wasn't just because he was trying to spoil me. If I didn't show as much interest as I did when I was a really little girl in the flute, I don't actually think they would have bought me a flute. If you are renting, you only end up paying around $25 to $35 a month for a beginner model flute. Let's say that I lost interest in the flute 2 or 3 months in. That way my parents would only be out maybe $60 to $100 out of their pocket rather than the full $750-ish that this thing costs. That is a lot more cost effective in case you don't end up being as interested in the flute as you thought you were. However, I have been obsessed with the flute since I was 5. I saw someone play it on TV and I fell in love. I would take my little toy recorders, I would go behind the sofa. I don't know why I did this behind the sofa. Maybe it's because I didn't want anyone catching me doing something so silly, but I would hold the recorder off to the side and kind of like twist my mouth that way and then like kind of play like this and pretend that I was playing the flute. Now I know that there is actually a plastic flute out there where you can blow into it like this, but as if you're blowing into a recorder. I think it's called like the Nuvo TooT. That would have been the most amazing gift to 5-year-old me. I made it very clear to my parents that I was obsessed with the flute. So much so that my dad went to our local music store and actually asked when I could start taking lessons and when I could start playing the flute. At that point, they said that because I was 5 years old, I was too young. Now we know that that's not actually the case. There are flutes actually built for younger players now, but at that point, it was a wide-held belief, at least in the town that I grew up in, that you weren't big enough, literally physically big enough to play the flute until you were at least 9 years old. My parents didn't actually tell me this until I was much older that they went to ask, but this was why they were so prepared to buy this flute for me. I was really surprised actually when my dad took me to the store to buy this flute. He made it very clear to me that I can actually just have a flute as long as I really put in the work to practice it and get better at it. Most importantly, he told me that he wanted me to enjoy it. There you go. That's my very long explanation of why my dad actually bought me, just straight up bought me a new flute, even though at that point I didn't really know how to play. So this happened when I was around 8 years old. Yes, so I actually started playing the flute a little bit earlier than my local music store actually wanted me to. Fast forward a few years, I was already playing things like the Mozart concertos on this guy. I believe I started learning the Chaminade concertino on this thing. As you can imagine, playing something like the concertino on this thing, you can really start to feel the kind of clunky mechanism. I don't know if you guys can actually hear it over video, but you can definitely feel it. Like the keys aren't going up and down extremely smoothly the way that you would want when you're ripping up a scale like that. The other thing is that once you get to a point in your tone development where you really want to start playing with tone color, student model flutes can only do so much. So for example, if I start playing with there is a key that is leaking. This guy's like not working. I was going for a more hollow tone there. If I go for a richer tone, like I can make the tone, but it's it doesn't have the depth that I want. Like, this flute just won't do it for me. And I was getting to the point where I was playing things like the Chaminade Concertino, which employs a lot of these sort of like very rich tonal qualities, because you're basically pretending like you're an opera diva and you're just kind of and you can't really get it completely across with a beginner model flute. That's when my teacher started to talk to my parents about upgrading me to a better flute. At that point, we weren't really exposed to many flutes that had just the silver head joint with a silver plated body. We just didn't know about them. However, my teacher found this guy. This is a Miteki. It is a solid silver flute throughout the entire tubing. However, it is closed hole and C-foot joint. And so because of that, it wasn't selling very well in the States. Everyone who wanted a solid silver flute wanted open hole B-foot joint. As far as what my teacher told us, she bargained it down from $8,000 to $2,000. $2,000 does tend to be around the cost of a step up slash maybe lower intermediate flute. This guy, when you play him, feels very, very smooth, and he can really deliver the kind of tone that I was looking for, you know, especially at that time. I wanted a tone that would be a lot kind of richer and would project further. You hear that? It takes a lot less effort to create the same tone production. Let's see if I go for a more hollow tone. Yeah, you can really feel there's like a natural zing to the sound that my Yamaha doesn't have. This Miteki is handmade in Japan. As we all know, Japanese handmade stuff is like top tier. I was very, very lucky to find this flute. At the time I was only 12, so my parents did actually pay for this flute. They were willing to basically buy my future for me. So this was the flute that ended up taking me into university. I auditioned into UBC with this Miteki. And I believe I played on this Miteki for about a year into music school. Now, why did I upgrade to my current flute, which is a Brannon? When I was 16 years old, Sir James Galway came to Vancouver. I was living in Vancouver, BC at the time. Because Sir James Galway was in town, and it's a huge deal when Sir James Galway is in town, the flutists in Vancouver decided to put on the first, and I believe the only ever, Vancouver Flute Festival. So because it was such a huge event, many flute companies came over to UBC School of Music to show off their flutes. I was suddenly exposed to all of these flute companies that I had never heard of before prior to going to that flute festival. And one of the companies was Brannon. Now, the reason why I was drawn to the Brannon booth was because they had the Brannon Kingma flute on display. This is a flute that includes quarter note keys. So I believe there's 6 extra keys that they put on the flute. You can play quarter tones. The idea was that you would be able to play anything that a composer ever wanted you to play. The other thing about this flute was that it was gold. My recollection in terms of how deep the yellow color was that it was at least 14 karat gold throughout. And this included the keys. Man, guys, I fell in love. That thing is beautiful. I didn't know what I was doing. I ended up just kind of asking the vendor there, like, you know, can I try this flute? She let me. I don't know why she let me. I was 16 years old and had no idea what I was doing. I thought I was just going to be playing this flute for fun. What I didn't expect was that I would fall in love with how it sounded. I was just like, holy crap, I already know how to play this flute. And this flute knows me. It felt like I found a long lost best friend. I really felt like it chose me in that moment. And I was like, holy crap, you know, I'm still holding on to this flute. And I end up asking the vendor how much it costs. And she said $29,000. I put it down as quickly as I could, as carefully as I could, and then I ran in the opposite direction as fast as I could, because I was just like, holy crap, I've now fallen in love with a flute that is way outside my budget. I had no budget at that time. I did not work during high school. My parents were the type to encourage me to concentrate on my studies instead. So I didn't have a job. There was no way for me to get money. At that point, it hadn't really occurred to me that I would be teaching, because I didn't actually start teaching until I was closer to 18 years old. 16-year-old me had no idea how I would ever get that kind of money to buy a flute like that. But I knew in my heart that I had found the company that matches me. Fast forward to when I'm 19 years old. At that point, I was getting really frustrated with my tone production on this guy. And I believe it has to do with the fact that I tried that Brandon when I was 16. And so for, you know, we're looking at like 3 years now that I am still holding on to that feeling of how I felt when I played a Brandon. I kept trying to make this guy sound like the Brandon that I played for a few moments. You can't make a silver flute that is made by a completely different company sound like a gold flute from another one. They are two different personalities. They like to be played different ways, and you can't apply one way that you play on one instrument to another. So I had that like crazy internal struggle for like 3 years, but at the same time, I didn't feel that I could ask to upgrade my flute in those years because I don't have money. So I went online to try and figure out what I could do to customize the flute to beat down the price as much as possible. I found out that I could get a gold copper alloy instead of just straight gold, and it would cost less. That way I can get a 10 karat rose gold. I was looking into rose gold before rose gold was a thing. At that point, the idea of having a rose gold flute was like really strange actually. But for me, it was the cheapest way for me to get a gold flute. I also decided to get silver keys instead of rose gold or 14 karat gold keys. However, I did ask for the C# trill key because I knew that, you know, with the way that modern composers were composing, I knew that that key was probably going to become part of normal flute mechanism in the future, which I think I'm right now. More and more intermediate flutes actually have a C# trill key. The lowest I could go was to get it down to just under $20,000. At that point, I was still like, holy crap, I don't think we can afford this. At the same time, I can't not discuss this with my parents because it is a real problem to be going to music school with an instrument that does not actually work for you, especially when that instrument is supposed to be your main instrument. It's your major. We had a lot of back and forth discussion. They told me that if they helped me buy this flute, that I would have to basically promise that I would actually become a professional flutist. They told me, however, that they could really only afford $10,000. I think that's already overkill in my mind. I tried to insist that I would pay more of that. However, my parents have even now continued to insist that that $10,000 is their gift to me. So I was like, okay, but we need to find the next $10,000. I did ask one of my relatives to sponsor me. He agreed. The agreement between us was that once I started to finally earn a living, like a stable income, that was when I would start making payments back to him for my flute. I am actually currently still paying off my flute. Now, was it worth it? I do believe it was worth it for me. So it happened. I ended up receiving my beautiful new Brandon 10 karat rose gold flute. I don't know if God arranged it or something, but it literally arrived on my doorstep on my 19th birthday. So I took it out, played it. It was exactly how I remembered that feeling of playing into that Brandon Kingma flute. Except I actually found it was even better. I felt like this rose gold flute actually fit me even better than a 14 karat flute. That was complete chance. I had no idea. I really should have actually tried a rose gold flute before buying it, but at that point I didn't know how trials worked and stuff like that, so I didn't even bother to ask. I literally just customized it online and ordered it. Prior to getting into music school, I made another preparation, which was that I knew that I would have to have a piccolo of some sort, like a working piccolo. So I asked my parents about it. You know, I talked to them and told them that, you know, a lot of times orchestra conductors will just kind of throw the piccolo part at you, and they don't care how you get a piccolo. I told my parents, is it okay if we just purchase a cheap piccolo? Secondhand piccolo, not wood or anything, just so it won't break, you know what I mean? Just something cheap just so I have a piccolo on hand to use when I'm called upon to use one. I believe we went to the Vancouver Long McQuaid in its old location. I have the documentation here. I still have the original receipt for my YFL 225 SII. Oh, looks like it wasn't that expensive. It was $475 at that point. Now it's like $700 something. It is exactly as I thought. We purchased this on February 1st, 2007. So this was a few months before I graduated from high school. We ended up paying almost $750 for this. This was fully in preparation to go into music school. My parents wanted to make sure that I was actually completely set. That's why we discussed the possibility of having a piccolo. We bought this piccolo and it's actually the exact same piccolo that I have now. I realize now that that was more than 10 years ago. It's this guy. And at that point, he had already been owned by someone else. And they were actually renting this guy out if people needed a piccolo to play and they just wanted to rent a piccolo. However, we decided to just straight up buy it off of them. He's not a bad little guy. In fact, this is the same little guy that I play on for Ensign Symphony. I've mentioned this before, but I believe something fell off, maybe a piece of felt or something like that. When this piccolo is exposed to any kind of heat, there's a little bit of padding under this key here. It will make it warm and sticky. And so when you play something like a B flat, it will take the other key down with it and it will turn into an A. I can still make this baby work just fine, and no one can even tell that I am not playing a wooden piccolo. The new piccolo of my dreams is a Nagahara Mini. I want to try all the woods that they use for Nagahara Mini. I want to try all of the cuts of their head joints and mix and match until I find the one that's for me. Why do I want it? It can go down to a low B. I love that. I have been given music on numerous occasions now, written by more modern composers who don't realize that the typical piccolo can only go down to a low D, and this music has notes that go down to a low C. If I have a piccolo that can go all the way down to like a low B, then it's not a problem for me anymore. It's more of a way for me to future-proof my piccolo. I also hear it tunes very well. I have looked up the price. It costs around $5,300. That is more than half of what I need to pay back for my own flute. If you're kind of looking at the finances like that, this thing is working and I have a financial plan to pay back my flute. And so therefore, it doesn't make sense for me to buy a new piccolo right now. Once I bought my flute, I was actually thinking that I would go and eventually find a new head joint for my flute. I have heard that Lafon head joints go very, very well with Brandon's. Linda Lukas was my master's flute teacher down in San Francisco. She's the second flutist of the San Francisco Symphony. She owns a Lafon head joint that goes with a Brandon. Let's look up a random Lafon head joint so you guys kind of have a better idea of how much it costs. There's one Lafon 14K rose gold tube, crown, and lip plate. This is just the head joint, okay? And it already costs $8,960. We're looking at Flute Center of New York, by the way. There's another Lafon Brandon head joint in 14K gold. This one is $9,455. We is looking at basically another $10,000 for the head joint of my dreams. Can you not see that it makes even less sense for me to look for a head joint? I do play third flute and piccolo in my symphonies, so it makes sense for me to upgrade my piccolo first, then the head joint of my flute first. My plan now allows me to save up for a nice new piccolo while I'm still making payments on my flute. After I get my new piccolo, then I will give myself some extra time to continue saving up. Down the line is when I'll need to kind of figure out what is more important. Is a new head joint more important, or is maybe getting a cheaper alto flute more important? I have actually been asked quite a few more times than I expected to be asked in the last few years since I've gotten out of school if I own an alto flute and if I can do a gig or play a part in Ensign or whatever with an alto flute. Let's now look at alto flutes. I know that Trevor James has some really, really good ones. The first one that comes up is approximately $2,350. Silver plated, straight and curved head joints with sterling silver lip plate and riser, silver plated body. That's pretty good. Honestly, I think that's good enough for me because I won't play the alto flute enough to justify getting a full silver alto flute. Basically, we're looking at just over $2,000. That is a pretty doable goal. Now let's review. Got to pay off my flute over the next few years. While I'm doing that, save up for this new piccolo so that I can play better for Ensign Symphony. I'll wait a few more years to continue saving up because you never want to just like drain your bank account, okay? Because you always have to have like an emergency fund in case something happens to you health-wise and stuff like that. Maybe get that alto flute. And then I'm thinking what I can do is save up some more and look for a used Lafon head joint. That way I can get it cheaper but still get a Lafon head joint. Last thing is, you guys are probably wondering what am I going to do with my old flute, my old Mateki, and my current piccolo, which is a Powell Sonari. This flute is currently my backup flute in case my flute is in the shop, which like it is now. If I need to teach or do gigs and stuff like that, I have a silver flute to fall back on. I currently don't have enough money to get this overhauled. I really want to get this overhauled though. The dream is to find a new head joint to go with this flute too, but that is like way off the charts. Like I won't get a new head joint for this thing until after I get a new head joint for my main flute, my Brannon. We're probably looking 30-40 years out from now, okay? For my piccolo, I am also going to keep this because it is a wood plastic composite. That means that this guy won't crack while he's sitting in storage. Very important to have backups in your inventory when you are a professional flutist. I'm not sure if anyone wants to work on this piccolo anymore, so I actually have not brought this piccolo in for a maintenance for many years now because I know that it's been recalled. So I don't want to waste anyone's time making them work on something that's been recalled. There you go. That is my general plan of how to amass my inventory of flutes and piccolos. I hope you guys found this insightful at least. Like, I just wanted to invite you in my head of how I am organizing my finances to be able to afford all this stuff. Let me know in the comments below how you guys are affording your instruments. Do you guys have financial plans similar to me? I would like to know. I think it'd be really interesting for us to share how we're all doing it. I've always felt a little bit alone in this journey. No one really likes to talk about the financial aspect of, you know, affording a flute and affording several flutes like this. I thought I would just be very plain and transparent with you guys with how I'm doing this. If you guys like this video, make sure you give me a big thumbs up and hit subscribe for new videos every Saturday. My last video is over there, and if you want to catch me during the week, my social media networks are down there. But otherwise, I will see you guys next week. Bye. It's more of a way for me. It fell.